Hey, hey, I'm Danielle. It's great to be talking with you today. I'm sitting here in Long Island and excited to talk about my story. So I'll take it back a couple years. It's 2025, so I think I've been sitting with this information for almost 2 years. It is a really interesting, I think, way that I found out I was donor conceived because I am 47 now. I was 46 when I found out. And I had absolutely no sense, no sixth sense, as they say, no part of my brain or upbringing that had any kind of aha moments that ever would have thought or entered like a genetic um, discussion or even process that would have made me think at some point growing up, are the parents that raised me not not biologically, my parents. So I think that's an interesting way to start because it was, I will say as someone who is I'm a huge fan of true crime. Like I love a Netflix murder mystery. I love finding out how the Golden State Killer's genetics happened. And as an educated person with awareness of this in the world, this had never crossed my mind ever. My mother passed away when I was 14. My parents were divorced before that. And my upbringing was very positive and loving. I had really loved my mom, but my parents were divorced and I had a really close relationship with my dad. And he passed away suddenly of a stroke 2 years ago. I bring that up because, again, life was very busy. I'm married and I have 3 children. And this was not something on my radar. And then after my dad died, there's just, as you would imagine, more time that you think back about like your childhood. You're thinking, you just take even the simple fact that you go through pictures at the funeral and you're looking at your father and you're looking, and we were very close. I mean, it's like the kindest, most amazing dad that I was ever, just so lucky to have. So in that process, you're just very contemplative and you're contemplated about life. And so there was like a year of like, obviously grief and mourning and things. And at about, I would say the year mark, this is great, my son just started to ask questions based on a school project about like more about our upbringing. And I have been a very, very proud Italian Irish lady. I think it's interesting to note that since my mom's side is Irish, since she passed, we were just exceedingly close to my grandparents. My dad's parents were what we would say on PC terms, off the boat Italians. We had Sunday dinner and we called the sauce gravy. We started to see my grandparents making it at 2 o'clock on a Sunday. Even my last name had a translation in Italian that would cause people to, I'll literally just say it. It translates to be big head or fat head. And people would say, hey, fat head. Well, I was Italian through and through. We had a fig tree in my grandparents' backyard. I mean, it went on and on. So my son was like, what parts of Italy are we from? Like, what regions? And my husband had bought a 23andMe kit for his own education. Like he had less of a connection to grandparents, and he thought at one point he'd like to know more about his own background. This kit sat in our house for a year. And then my son's project came along, and then my husband was like, why don't you go? And also he's a Nick. Husband was like, Nick should take this test. And I was like, I don't care. Sure. Have him take the test. Like I didn't even care about it. I was like, my family's my family. Like, I don't care. Sure, let him take it. I was like, I can tell you, I know most of the places we're from in Italy, like from the stories that I know about. But like my grandmother's parents weren't as close to knowing exactly which region. So we knew my grandfather was from in Italy, that kind of stuff. So he took the test and he got the test back. And I'm busy at work and I'm not even paying attention to this. And we got into the kitchen and my husband was like, you got to look at Nick's results. He doesn't have Italian. And I was like, what do you mean he doesn't have Italian? And he's like, says he's 30% Jewish. I'm like, well, he's not Jewish. We're Italian and Irish. Yeah. So that started to become this conversation that unfolded in the kitchen that was quite passionate because on one hand, I had my husband saying, well, maybe your grandparents were like, hiding. They were Jews and hiding. And I was like, look, they had pictures of the Pope on the wall. I grew up with these people. He had met them. I was like, there was just no reason in modern America. He came from Italy when he was 9. They wouldn't have a reason to hide this. Like that can't be it. So then I went down a path of ignorance of denying that genetics can like go through to your kid. I was like, well, look, I don't know much about DNA. Maybe it skips a generation. I just was like hands off on this. I was like, I'm not a party to this. So then, of
Yeah.
course, I couldn't be hands off. So my husband was like, you have to take a test. You have to. And then he also was like, and I have to take a test because now he's confused. So we're all confused. So now we all take the test. So I'll fast forward a bit. Oh, the story will be 3 hours long. So we all take the test. Now it's just a matter of like, who's going to get it back first, right? So now my husband's comes back and what he thought was going to be the real aha moment for himself is just, exactly what he thought. He's everything he thought. So it's not him. So we're like, okay, so then it has to be you. I'm like, okay, great. So I'm waiting. I get the test back. And of course, I'm at work and I get the results because you don't know when the results are coming. You're waiting and waiting and you're kind of panicked, but you're also not sure what to be panicked about. So then you get this email and here I am, like I have a pretty stressful, job in some senses. It's busy. And then I get this email and I'm like, I go into a conference room and I'm having like an actual heart attack because I'm looking at the results and it's clear as day. My results say 50% Ashkenazi Jewish, 50% Irish. And so right away, because nothing has been told to me and I'm 46 years old, I am like floored. So first I'm going to become enraged at the company. So I call them and I yell at them. I yell at everybody that answers the phone. This can't be right. This is wrong. I was like, how does this work? I was like, I know where my grandparents are from. And like the poor, like 20-year-old probably on the phone is like, in these situations, we suggest that other people in your family test. Do you have any siblings? And I was like, yes, I have a sister. And they're like, we suggest your sister takes. And I was like, but just tell me, how does genetics work like this? Like, could there be a mistake? And they just keep saying, because they can't say it. And then I also have a sidebar for a different podcast about how we need to put like black box warnings on these. I want to change the marketing of the test, but that's a whole side project. So anyway, so they can't say anything. So they just keep encouraging me to do the other tests. Okay, so I drop that route, and of course now I'm like just sitting here with this, and the first thing I'm thinking is, now my mom is gone, right, and my dad is gone. So I'm like, okay. Well, my mom was a registered nurse. Did she have an affair, like Grey's Anatomy style? Like, did she get it on in the call room with a Jewish doctor? And this is how I'm going to find out. Like, that's immediately what I went to. And then I bring that home and then I'm talking about it with my husband. And it's like, of course, like, what's the other side of it? It's like, well, it's an affair or could they not have kids? And I'm like, right. Which I just, maybe, but no one told me this. This is nothing I've ever heard of. So now I'm on a fact-finding mission. So then you start going through all the people that you know and who's alive and who's related, So I start on my dad's side and I have a cousin who's really into genealogy. She used to always post stuff about ancestry and our grandparents and our grandmothers were sisters. So I reach out to her. I'll protect her name. I say, hi, cousin. Well, our grandmothers are sisters. Like, they were born in Italy, right? I'm picking at questions. I'm like digging and I'm not really getting the answers. And she's like, yes, yeah, they were. And I'm like, okay. So then I'm like, okay, I need to go to the most direct path. So my mom was one of 6, very close with sisters. So I call a cousin and I say, cousin, I have to ask you a question. I need you to go right now, ask your mom, call your mom and say at any point, did she remember back in the good old late 70s that my mom might have suggested to her as close sisters that they had trouble having kids? And within 5 minutes, I get the call and my cousin calls me back and she's like, Danny, yeah, she says it was a long time ago, but she said she thinks she recalls that your mom may have referenced it at that time that they were having some trouble having kids, but that it wasn't really talked about again. So now again, I'm putting pieces together. So I'm like, wow, okay. So at that point, this is like the next part that uncovers is I'm like deep into the like looking at the data. And of course, it's like all of the names or no names I recognize. And you have this sort of moment, and especially with my dad recently gone, that again, more marketing for these tests. It's like, it says mother, and then it says father, and it's not your father. And there's just like this emotion with like this, father, your father is not there. And I will say there was no father. I did not connect to a father. I did connect, however, to a half sibling. So now I'm like, wow, okay. So now I have a sister who lives pretty far away in another country, now is raising kids in another country who doesn't know any of this yet. And I have now this half sibling shows up on my data. And so right away, I send a message. I say, it appears that we are half siblings. I'm a very confused person here. in Long Island. I don't know if you have information, if anyone's ever reached out to you. And she's as nice as it can be, also a little flustered because she's been sitting on this app for 2 years and no one's reached out to her. So she and I talk, and it is all unfolding to me now that it is clear I am a donor conceived person. I don't even know these words yet. DCP, acronyms for birth father and BF. It's all things that are like, just like my brain is rattled. And I
Right.
had a nice conversation.
And to be
with her.
clear, this
Yeah.
half-sister that you connected with, she was the only one that appeared on the family tree at the time?
The only one that appeared on the family tree that was, from what I could understand, and then from our messages, was another donor conceived person. So a donor sibling, not the donor's children.
Got it. Okay.
However,
Go ahead. Yeah.
I then get Ancestry and get that test as well. So it does uncover in the data and the genetics that there are half siblings who show up as, the data, as I'm sure you have started to see, and how people now in this world know it's not that apps are not a perfect science. So it can claim somebody's a cousin, but they're a half sibling. So it's
Right.
like the data puts it together for you, obviously, like genetic Facebook, but it doesn't fill it in perfectly. So then you have to either contact a DNA angel, which I did, or someone who's very skilled in genetics to help interpret and kind of put it together. I then did that, and I went through the searching of trying to find out. So I guess just to finish that point, I did have these other like cousins / half sisters. One that was clear that it was another person and we were connected. I did later find out this was the donor's chosen biological children. So then I think I'm trying to think of what I did. I think I found the Facebook network of, I think I watched something that someone sent to me that was the woman that founded, the Donor Conceived Friends Facebook group. And I watched something that was on like on the news. It was like a talk show, and referenced the fact that there was like a private group for people in this age of discovery of genetic tests that was like helping to bring people together for like community and also just to help. And so I joined this Facebook group called DCP Friends. And in that Facebook group was shown like what a DNA angel is, or a genetic counselor that would volunteer their time and help you put together your family tree. So then I did that.
Got it. Okay.
So then I did that, and she was amazing, and she helped put together all of the connections, and I started to really go on a kind of emotional journey of finding out just like who I am and wrestling with this. And there was like a lot to it. I think, on one hand, I was inquisitive, and on one hand, it's like I'm just really focused on finding out truth, right? So like I haven't processed, if you want to call it a form of trauma, I haven't processed the trauma yet of my identity. I was more processing, finding out all the details I could. So it was like, I felt like I was like a private investigator. Like first I want to find out all these things. And it's almost like then I shifted to process things more. So I'm like going on the mission first of like, who am I? What does this mean? I also have to call my sister. So I had to call my sister, which was challenging because also a person who has lost her father and has had an upbringing that she's connected with. And I have to be the person to call her. And I said, "Are you sitting down?" And explained it to her. And then the first thing was, I was like, "You have to get the tests." So then she also ordered both the tests. So then at least we had a little bit of camaraderie and like sharing this together. And then we were basically both doing the same thing, like being private investigators with the help of this great network and other people in our situations like yourself, of that you're meeting. And then on the other side of that is connecting with your current family to understand more about things in your past that weren't given to you and that you are uncovering on your own. And some of that I'm still doing now, So yeah, so there's a lot that's like in there, because I think in the part where you're figuring it on your own, I think I'm going to connect to something that you said in your book, if that's okay. Your parents I thought like there was a really nice discussion about, and it sounded like understanding on both sides about the time frame we're dealing with, right? Like what life was like in the 70s and early 80s. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of empathy, I think, on that side. So I think that's like one part of it. And it's hard to blame, first of all, it's hard to blame dead people, right? Like, so so that's a little challenging. And it's
Hmm.
also hard to blame people who are all doing the best they can at the time that they were living it. So I don't have like anger towards my parents at all, really, or my dad. I think some of it was a product of like not necessarily fully understanding how important this is for someone in a way that like you know should have been I think it's like the part of your book, it's systemic, right? Like I blame the system and
Yeah.
I blame the doctors in the time period of the early 70s and 80s. I don't blame my family and my parents for being a part of it. However, it is extremely traumatic to find this out at 46 on your own and through the roundabout way I did, which was going from my parents having, an affair, to the donor conceived part, to confusion about that just being shocking and never think like it. I guess the best way to say it's like it didn't have to be this hard. Like this all could have been very different. Whether I grew up somewhere with the knowledge, whether our system was different in terms of how you would tell offspring that are donor conceived, like it shouldn't in today's modern society. I could have very well died never knowing this truth. If
Hmm.
things didn't happen the way that it happened. So I guess in some way I'm like, it's kind of lucky, grateful that I found out, but it should have not happened in the traumatic way, in my opinion, that it did. It could have, there's many different roads that could have happened. And then I also think now is like sitting with, well, like, what is nature versus nurture? And what are these points of your identity that you should know and have a reason to know and how it shapes you? And the people that argue the side that it does not matter, or I hate the phrase, but your dad was your dad. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, he was. But tell me that you're not the same people having the conversation that says, hey, you get your dance moves from your uncle, or hey, like every day, people are making comments like that in our lives, on the TV and films and shows that we love. So to forget that part of it while someone else is uncovering it is, to me, like that's like the biggest tragedy. To say that it
Hmm.
does not matter and it's not relevant is like absolutely crazy to me. So now I'm in this like, I think you could see I'm actually wearing a Jewish star. It's like in some ways, I think I started to think back of all these things from my younger life, of amazing connections that I had with Jewish families, of similar humor, of similar look, of things that really became like an aha moment for me. And then on the other hand, I'm mourning this very, very specific Italian identity that I culturally grew up with and in some ways still am. I cook Italian. I
Yeah.
thought I talked with my hands because I was Italian. I made jokes about nanas. It just was like, there was a part of me that was going to go to this place that my grandparents were from and meet these people who knew my father from back in the 70s or 80s, that when he died were like, we met your father, we had come to New York. And there was a part of me that was like texting with my sister being like, hey, would you ever want to go and meet them? They still live there in Italy. I mean, I can't tell you how much I would not go to Italy now.
Hmm.
It just, if they weren't people that were in my life to begin with, now without, that was the only thing that would have connected us, right? Like I'm going on this pilgrimage to Italy to meet people that are related to me.
Right.
So it did kind of change that completely. It can't not change it.
Hmm.
So it's like, how do you become for 46 years? Like, how do you just all of a sudden be like, you're not Italian anymore? Like if you're a fan of Sebastian Maniscalco, if you're a fan of great comedy, if you're a fan of anything that makes us passionate and exciting in this world, you know that it matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a similar experience where, I always identified primarily as Italian. And then these results come back, and just like you, it's pretty much half Ashkenazi Jewish. And, I never leaned into my Italian roots I didn't wear it on my sleeve, but if I ever was trying to explain to people what my ancestry composition was, I'd always be like, oh, I got the Italian genes. And now it's like, oh, I'm only 10% Italian. So yeah, I could totally relate to that. I guess we're at a point where I can ask some questions, I think.
Yeah.
How have you, I'm sure you've sat with this, how have you envisioned, not having your parents around, like what those conversations could have been like, sharing what you now know with them?
Yeah.
How could you, what do you imagine those conversations could have been like?
I think on one hand, in some way, at least from my dad's side, I think it was a bit of a blessing. As difficult as it is, I think that there's a part of, you knew my dad, I think there's a part of him that would have been heartbroken that I knew.
Hmm.
Even though I know from a medical perspective and as a mom and a mother and someone that I really should have known this information before I got married and had kids. Like you just should know. There's so many things. However, I think that it would have, I think that there's some part that in some ways, I don't even know if I would have told my dad, to be honest. I think I would
Hmm.
have wanted the information for myself, and I maybe would have never told him that I know. I think it would have, I don't know that it would have helped, and I don't know that it would have improved anything in our relationship. I believe I should have known, but at least for him, I don't know if I would have wanted to know that I know. And I
Hmm.
only say this because of the type of sweetheart of a man he was. I think that it wasn't, I think he definitely, from further conversations I had with others, he knew for sure. So even though it was that time, it was in the days where it was encouraged that you didn't know, but the situation, from what I found out, that it was like it wasn't the situation where like you mixed donor sperm and to give it a boost. It was
Right.
that there was like a medical issue, that there was like a sterility. So
Hmm.
so obviously he knew my he always knew. There was never a
Yeah.
doubt. These parents knew for sure that we weren't, both children, both girls were not biological. So from
Right.
that side, I think that I don't know that he would have dawned on him in some ways to be like, she needs to know this information. Now, my mother, on the other hand, I think is quite different because she was a nurse. And if she had lived, she was only 44 when she died. So if she had lived, again, it's hard to say. She was highly intelligent and educated. If she started to become aware of the tests, I would like to think that if she was around, she would have told me as a nurse.
Hmm.
I will not ever know that information, but it's something that I think I would like to believe, that especially when, you're a new married person and you're starting to talk about having kids, or having kids that might have either medical or neurological or different types of things, that it would be impossible not to say, oh, hey, you should know this information,
Hmm.
or like, you might be a carrier of something and you might marry someone who's a carrier. I think that's the important part of this discussion too. So I'd like to think that if she saw these tests and she saw what nobody could have seen back in the 70s, that we would have had a conversation about it. But
Yeah.
then, I hear so many stories from people who don't. They don't think
Right.
they don't think you should know. And
Yeah.
it is a phenomenon. Like, it's hard not to have this conversation with you and not get passionate about the industry of like, how do we prioritize couples' interest in having children as the priority, and not the child we're creating and what that future for that child is? The child is going to grow up and be a couple one day who also wants to have children. Yet we're
Yeah.
deprioritizing that person for now because we
Right.
want to make everybody in the 70s, 80s really happy. So like, let's focus on that and not think about the fact that that child's going to be an adult who hopefully one day won't marry their half brother.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think like all of this is generational too. Like it's not just one generation that's affected by this. You as a mother now, like this is
Yeah.
passed down to your own child. So I'm curious, when your son got his results back, I know he was pretty young, but did he notice anything seemed
Right away.
off, or
Yeah.
he did? Okay.
Yeah. So we had to have a big conversation with him. A funny aside is that in the like ongoing adventure of this, we did take a trip and we met our donor my half sibling. And
Okay.
it was fun and confusing for him.
Yeah.
It's like you're wrapping your head around this information and then you're meeting someone who you're like, this is your aunt. And it's like,
Right.
oh, okay. So we did do that, and it was quite fun, I will say. And I think it will be a journey for him. Like, I think he will continue to ask questions as he gets older and understands it more. Now, I think in some ways it's like, fun new information, about himself, and he can like share it. But in other ways, I think it's like, in some ways more my story than his. But now at least he knows like the background. But he did ask questions. Like, I think he was smart, and he did ask like the biological connections to the people in his life that he knows and how that changes things. And we explained it. We just have been extremely honest and direct with him. And also the medical stuff. There are things that he is going to have to know as he gets
Mhm.
older that were uncovered. And then, at least at this stage now, I've been very focused on trying to understand more about these people that I'm from, this biological connection
Yeah.
of like who they were and when did they come here and what things about them do I see in myself. And I've been able to uncover some things now to put those pieces together.
Mhm.
And that's been like kind of slow and lots of discussion. I've also hit some sad sort of walls with people who started off to be very vocal and talking to me and helping me figure out who the donor was and who the family was. And then those people, due to different reasons, saying they no longer wanted to talk to me. And, you're
Yeah.
already like a victim, you're already like some victim of trauma. And then you're like, now this like, you forge this relationship, and now is like, we can't continue to talk anymore. And it's like,
Mhm.
cool. You know what? Fine. I have lots of other friends, and now I have donor conceived people that are my friends. I don't need you to be my friend. You should be
Yeah.
lucky that I want to talk to you. Like it's like you start to convince yourself all these other things because you're rejected. And that's
Right.
sad. And there are some
Yeah.
people that aren't, and they forge these great relationships. So then you feel sort of jealous of that side.
Now, when you were in communication with how is it's one half sister or you have
On
multiple
the
half?
donor side, yeah. So far, in terms of donor siblings, on both platforms, I've only uncovered one. So I don't know if
One.
there's more that will join platforms and will get welcomed. But so
Yep.
far, only one. And of course, we're 1 month apart. No shock there.
Right. So with that one half sister, was it on the two of you to kind of do the detective work to figure out who the donor was? Was that
Yes,
like a joint
it was
effort
more
between the two of
me.
you?
Yeah, interesting because she had known earlier. And I think this is, again, this whole world is very individual. I think people want to jump in and know everything. And she's one of those people that she said she was fine for me to take the lead. She was less focused on that, but open for me to share what I found. Like if I found pictures and if I found history, I sent it and we talked about it. But I definitely was more of the like aggressor of trying to find this information out. So I really did it. I basically did it all myself with the help of the DNA angel, genetic counselor.
Yeah.
And I do have a full family tree now put together, and I have a full picture that I could argue is enough to be, I guess, satisfied, except for the part that is a part of you that wishes there was a personal relationship that others would want, that they don't want.
Right.
They don't
Right. So you cracked the code, you figured out who the
crack the
donor
code.
was. What did that feel like once you made that discovery?
It is very, in some ways, it's like shocking because you see yourself in photos, you see your kids in photos, which I did. I was able to get lots of great pictures, like pictures from younger pictures that I will say, I mean, good on these doctors in 1977, because if you put my 1977 dad next to this 1977 guy, even though we got an Italian and a Jew, I mean, they looked like two fros with mustaches walking down the block together. So
Yeah.
I understand that perhaps maybe that was a direction that, well, like, I have no idea how they did it back then. Did they have a
Right.
picture? I don't know. But if they did, there was something that they might have been like, this guy seems right,
Mhm.
besides the genetic background, but the
Yeah.
ethnicity part. So outside of that, it is definitely weird. I mean, it's weird because it's like you look like these people, but you don't know them. Obviously these are biological grandparents that, if in a different situation, would have been your grandparents. but they're
Yeah.
not, and you never met them, but you look like the grandfather. And you have traits as described to you: great cook, a baker, sense of humor, smart, things like, artistic, things like that. I will say that recently I had a development in the last month where there was a cousin of the donor, um, a, who was 8 years older than him, a female. So she's not really an aunt because she's his cousin, but grew
Hmm.
up with him, grew up with the donor, and she agreed to have lunch with me.
Okay.
So I took a little pilgrimage, and that was very cathartic. It
Hmm.
was a real relative on the donor side that wasn't super close with him as they got older, and was able to just show pictures, show family tree. And she squeezed my hands at the end of the lunch. I mean, she's probably in her later 80s. And she said, "If you ever need anything, cousin Danielle, I'm here for you." And it was emotional. It was
Yeah.
really emotional. And we took a picture, and I do think we look a little alike. And so there's a part of me that was like, I'm starting to wrestle at this stage of like, is this enough? Like, did I get enough, in these 2 years now to feel like this is coming together for me a bit? So I'm starting to like, that's kind of where I'm at in this now.
Okay.
It's not perfect, but it's in some ways light years ahead of others,
Hmm.
and in some ways not enough,
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I guess I should back up. Is the donor, is he still alive?
Yes,
He is. And have you, or did you make efforts to
I did.
meet with him? And okay, you did.
I
How did that play
I
out?
did the letter. I did the letter thing with pictures.
Okay.
From what I've understood from the lunch that I had, and from what I understood from the email that I got from another relative who started off being like my buddy, helping me to figure this out, because it's
Hmm.
another cousin and we're all from the same line. He started off being like, we're partners in crime here. Now, what I know is that the donor asked them not to talk to me anymore.
Okay.
Except this
Got it.
lady in her 80s was like, after that, let's go to lunch.
Yeah.
Like, she has nothing to lose. So that was just fun. I think that the other ones are probably too close with him or his kids, and
Hmm.
feel the need to honor that and not speak to me. So
Right.
I've just accepted that.
Right. And did the donor ever communicate with you, or was it
No.
all through family members?
Through family members, I think that he just wants nothing to do with it. And so and
Got it.
that's fine. I mean, look, I get it. I think I approached it in a very not emotional, rational way of like even being empathetic to the position of the donor at that time, and not
Hmm.
possibly understanding the science fiction world that we're in now. And I think it's unfortunate that my approach wasn't received as I would have liked it, which in my opinion, I thought was fairly minimal. Like,
Right.
sure, would I have, like, I would be lying to you if I said that if this guy was like, "Do you want to meet for a coffee?" I wouldn't have wanted that. I would have wanted to look the person in the eye. I don't know that we have to go like shopping and on a trip together, but like, I
Right.
think I would have liked that. But I, I think it's unfortunate that I couldn't get like the minimum, which was just like kind of an acknowledgement, maybe an email that says like, "Look, it's too complicated to have this relationship. However, I'll share some information with you." I think
Right.
something a little empathetic on my side would have been nice, but this is
Hmm.
that, acceptance, I have to accept that that's just not what he was willing to do.
Right. And it's unfortunately the results of a very broken system that we
Right.
come from. So, shifting gears a little bit, you mentioned that your sister, who you grew up with, I believe,
Yep. Yep.
also is donor conceived.
Yeah.
She is not from the same donor?
Nope. So
No. Okay.
that was like another, yeah, like this is where it's such a web. It's like, again, for the purposes of educating the community, it starts like you think this uncovery or discovery, right? Is like you find out these certain things, but all these little pieces connect to become another aha moment. So, like, that was another one. It was like, wait a minute, we might not have the same donor. And that's another thing to wrestle with. So when she got her test back, she did find out she was from a different donor. And so now
Okay.
you're like, you have feelings there. That's my half sister also. So, so now I have two half sisters, and that's emotional, especially I think. I can't speak for her, but I think when you've lost your mom young too, we felt very strong between each other. And so even though we live far away now, now you're sort of sitting with that of like, have we distanced a little bit just genetically? And how do we feel about that? Now, if
Yeah.
anything, it's been positive because if anyone understands what you're going through, it's her, right? We're dealing with the exact same thing.
Yep.
So we talk a lot about it, but it also kind of sucks, you know?
Right.
So she's unraveling her, path, and we talk about it and similar. And we ended up using the same DNA angel too. So that was kind of fun so that we could
Okay.
talk about it.
And then I guess going a little deeper into your extended family, have you chosen to share this with them? And if so, how did you see them respond to the news?
It's very individual. You have people who like right away are just like get it and get how big it is. And you have people that like think it's not that big of a deal. But everybody knows. I have definitely shared it with everybody. I would say that the side, and I feel okay talking about this, but I do think on the side of my dad, well, all of this makes sense now, but like there's not a lot of cousins. And now I know why. There was a genetic situation that prevented these brothers, from being able to have their own kids. So, but I do think on that side, again, there's not a blame, but it's very hard to think of the fact that there are people in the world who knew you and knew something, well, obviously knew something about you for over 40 years, and you didn't know it about yourself. And so it's not like blame isn't the right word or resentment, but it's just another oddity because there's no way they didn't because you just knew this you just knew this. So every time I walked into a room or every time we were at a gathering, you knew this information. Now maybe you're not thinking about it every day but it's again very strange to think that these people would have known something so intimate about me that I didn't know and I maybe wouldn't have found out.
Right. And you've been able to confirm that they did know this?
But I'm able to only confirm because of the fact that we knew the reason that my dad couldn't have kids was a genetic issue,
okay,
like that prevented that. So like because we knew that, just by nature of us being here, you had to draw that conclusion.
Right. Okay.
So that's the part that like it irks me. I guess that's the best word. Whereas like on my mom's side, there is the strong potential that it's either direction. That like that it is quite true that at that time there weren't deep conversations about this, and that perhaps she didn't tell them. Like it is possible that she might have mentioned it in passing, but then once she got pregnant, she was just happy and never further explained, oh, hey, this ended up not working. Again, we are the product of a Irish Catholic time. So these things were not talked about as much. Now, I think it opened up a bit more in the later 70s and 80s, but I don't know for sure that anything was discussed enough that they knew and thought about it until now. So
got it. Talk to me a little bit. I always say to my wife, like, she's on this ride with me.
Oh yeah.
From the very beginning, like she's been by my side and, has her own feelings around all of it. Your husband seems to have played or has been part of the picture from the very beginning and even took the test alongside you.
Yeah.
So could you talk to me a little bit about like the importance of, a partner being with you for this completely unexpected part of your being?
Yeah, it's so important. I really think back now, and if it wasn't his own interest in understanding his background, because he bought the test for himself, we might not have even gotten here. So in some ways I have to thank him because that's what led us to it. But yeah, I think this would be so difficult to do without a supportive, loving partner for many reasons. I mean, even just the fact that religion, we haven't really talked about it. What if we were deeply entrenched, and he is actually very Christian, but to the point that this would have been very difficult to accept. And in our case, it was not difficult to accept, but it could have been.
Right.
I mean, this could have really changed the course of a marriage or a family, depending on which direction or what the opinions are. So on that side, it was very supportive. Lots of jokes, lots of humor, had to be had here because otherwise it's just like all so much. But like with every discovery, with every new email, like with every part of this, with every new person supporting this trip to go, to across the states to go meet someone on a plane, like he's just been like the best. It's also just so fascinating. It's endless discussion, but it also just brings up a lot of these discussions about like who we are and our genetic makeup and what we know and don't know about ourselves. And also just every day, sometimes more things unfold. Like, we will say things like, we always thought this about our son was, and then that, but then you're like, oh, but it's not. Like,
Hmm.
it's like you have a moment every time, or he'll pick up a picture of like me and my like 10 cousins on my mom's side, and we'll look at it and he'll be like, look at your face. Like, you don't look like them. Like when you guys were all younger, they all
Yeah.
look like little Irish kids. Like
Hmm.
I definitely stand out. And it's just, you're just putting these things together. So yeah, so it's been so good, to have this be a real positive part of it, and I think it could have gone, and I'm sure for other people, it does go probably to a negative place.
Right. Well, that's great that you have that support there in him. I guess let's unpack that, that feeling like you just alluded to of like looking at a photo and seeing that, oh, wait, like maybe I don't really fit in with the rest of the people in this photo the way I thought
Yeah.
I did. Did you have any other moments that you thought back on where you're like, that's why I felt out of place, or that's why,
Yeah.
things just didn't feel the way they seemed to be?
Yeah, it's funny. Some of it's also more like inclusive. Like I remember being sort of like in some ways like adopted at some point by a couple Jewish families at the time that my mom was sick when I was 14, that by nature, and this could just be a coincidence. I don't know. But my very best friend when I was young, her family, we used to sleep over their house. They were a very loving married couple, Jewish family, and they were wonderful. And I felt very comfortable there. I had lots of dinners there. When my mom was sick, they sent lots of baskets and lots of things. And it was only through this discovery that I was like looking back and I was like, that's interesting. Only because I grew up in a place that there was not a lot of Jewish families. The place that I grew up in, Long Island, was a very small town. It was very Catholic and very Irish, but we were a smaller school and we knew two Jewish families and we knew their last names by hand. There was two.
Yeah.
Now, I
Hmm.
moved when my mom died to a bigger school and certainly then was thrown into like a melting pot of like a more average picture of society. But when I was younger, I do think that that's interesting. Like you could argue, well, that's just a coincidence, maybe, but I felt comfortable with them. And then I
Right.
looked back and I was like, that's interesting. I don't know if I've had experiences growing where I felt like separate or different because like I grew up so much believing on the other side that I was Italian. So it was really a shock. Like it really was a shock to me. It never entered into my mind at all that the father
Hmm.
I knew was not my biological father. Like I
Right.
was convinced that like we looked alike, but we don't really. There were
Yeah.
so many things I had kind of, in some ways it's psychological. I think you believe what you're handed. So I just bought, there was no reason for me to think otherwise. But
Hmm.
it's the opposite in looking back, where now I see different connections to the other heritage that I think is interesting. And even just that word is interesting. It's like, I've only been a Jew for 2 years. So, there's a lot that goes into that. It's like, you're uncovering what does that mean, culturally versus religion versus ethnicity. And I happen to benefit from my mother-in-law being a very not religious Jew. So,
Hmm.
and she's, the grandmother my kids know. And, obviously there's not a blood relation there. And that has been helpful to me because the day I told her, it would have, you would have thought like I got a menorah in the mail. I mean, there was so much Yiddish coming to me through text message. And she is, and would be fine if I said this, and she's an atheist. So like right away you're there, it's like, I'm learning about an identity of where there's this woman who is as Jewish as they come. You ask her, Barb, tell me about yourself, you know,
Right.
grandma, tell me about yourself. And grandma will say, I'm a Jew.
Yeah.
Do you go to temple? No. Do you believe in God? No. So then right away, as a person that's like discovering something, you're like, this is fascinating. So
Yeah.
I do have the benefit of that. So that's helpful too.
So that's interesting. That means your husband is half Jewish. Is that
Well,
correct?
no, because it's a stepmom for him.
Oh, stepmom. Okay.
Yeah,
Got
yeah,
it.
yeah. So
Got it.
not, yeah. So there was not a, but again, but he grew up with his father was in love with, this Jewish lady, and he
Right.
went to the wedding because they fell in love later in life. And it was later in life, but before we had kids. So was the grandma the kids know. So I do think that I benefit from that too. And it's kind of like, that's also strange, like in your book, you reference the fact that like, it wasn't like was on your radar in travels.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, obviously times are challenging now, but it's hard to not think about that at the same time that I was thinking about I was going to go to a small fishing village in Italy.
Yeah. So let's explore just a little bit more of how like Judaism now factors into your life. I don't know if it's fair to say that the religion has, been front and center for you, but the culture, at least, of being Jewish sounds like is part of who you are now. Like how did that become, more part of your identity? Obviously you have the genetics, but like in the way that you
Yeah.
experience life, how did that start to fit in?
Well, I mean, this is actually where I did consult my husband a lot because he has a master's in theology, and
Hmm.
so he is already a great resource for things. And I said, "Who do I talk to?" And he said, "A rabbi."
Yeah.
I was like, great. Well, like, how do I know what rabbi to talk to? And he's like,
Hmm.
well, we got to talk to the ones that don't say things like, if your mother's not Jewish, you're not Jewish. And I was like,
Right.
yeah, I don't want to talk to that kind. And I was like, I'm having enough trouble that I can't start getting into like the categories of like, you're Jewish if your mother's Jewish. I was like, I got to stick with the genetics here. It says 50% Jewish, 50% Irish. So I'm going to eat some Irish soda bread, and I want to talk to a rabbi that's going to embrace me. So help me
Yeah.
find the right guy. So he did. And it was like, so instead of meeting at a bar, an Irish lady whose donor conceived met a rabbi at a coffee shop. And that was the joke. And we sat down at the coffee shop, and I had a great conversation with this rabbi who made me feel very welcomed. He offered me a couple books to read, and it was more about connecting to the culture of it, the identity, what is Shabbat. And there is so many beautiful things about, like, if anything, I would say it's like we're more alike than we are different. Um, to me, this journey has been, for me, less religious and more like identity and cultural. Because even like I grew up going to, Christmas Eve mass. I grew up going to church every Sunday with my Italian grandparents. But for me, it didn't really translate into a deeply, I believe in God and I believe in spirituality. My everyday life does try to revolve around that, but I'm not like set on a particular organized approach to religion. So in that way, I think I was lucky because I feel that culturally I would like to appreciate both identities of being raised in Irish Catholic Italian and now being a cultural Jew, as well as still embracing my Irish side too, and still finding this place to appreciate being raised Italian with Italians. Like that is the most
Yeah.
complicated part, really, is that section of what does the Italian part mean for me now? Because those people made me who I am. I think that's like the part that's like, you're putting this all together, the Italians, the Jews, the Irish, Um, and there are so many similarities, especially the time period we're talking about. If you really talk historically, right? Like
Hmm.
this group of people were really born from people who came here in the 1900s, who a lot of them also all settled here on Long Island. I think this is, to me, the fascinating part is that from what I understand now, and from what I understand from you too, my donor very well and family could have operated an establishment that my biological father went to. The
Yep.
schools that they went to are part of a very nationwide place called Levittown, the Levitt houses. So we are talking even by design of our country and by how suburbia came to be, a place that drove these actual families all to a similar place, and now
Hmm.
could have even in some ways crossed path. Like the reality is, the Levitt houses were made. That is where my Italian family moved from Brooklyn, and it is where the donor family also lived and worked, and then of course my mom's side too. And we're talking about this little small piece of land. So that's this other like strange thing of all being connected and trying to like figure this out, And I don't think
Right.
that's not even too, I think, dissimilar from your parts of your story too.
Hmm. That's interesting. So basically, no matter how you slice it, you essentially come from, people that are all coming from the same place. It's just who am I
Yeah.
tied to genetically and who am I not?
Yeah. And literally, like the Lower East Side, like parts of Manhattan, like that are literally where they all were, all three, all.
Yeah. Yeah. Wild stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess one more quick question, and then I'll let you add any other bits that maybe we haven't covered yet. But I'm curious, especially in the early days of you uncovering all of this, was there anything you look back on and say, you know what, this day-to-day practice or this way I chose to live my life really helped me in, those traumatic moments? Is there anything that you do, mindfully that has been helpful to kind of get you on solid ground with it all?
I do think that I tend to be a person that like is like wait till there's like a problem before like address like figure out what it is before and then try to like address it versus like projecting the outcome of things. So I did try to just take each thing as it unfolded um and deal with it in the moment. And I do think probably I like to credit that the parents that I had that raised me, that very early time frame of love that I was probably given, that is not like clear psychologically from when you're a baby to maybe being 9 or 10 years old, played a role in feeling like a confident and secure person because you know handling things like divorce and then my mom dying of cancer and then these things that like started to happen, being able to like accept these things and kind of work through them. I'd like to think that that had something to do with these two people that were lucky enough to get this donation, this, from a donor that, and I, try to credit that I was like really lucky to have the family that I had, and that kind of shaped me to be who I was. And then the other part I think is really just like, using humor has been a really big part. I think it's impossible not to call out the genetic part here because you just can't. Like, you know, there is something about the Larry David Seinfeld esque part of this that has obviously always been a part of me, but not able to fully embrace it until now. That to me very much has helped navigate all these different challenges. And I think it's like impossible not to say that doesn't matter because I
Yeah.
do feel like that's part of it, like humor, complaining, all of this stuff. It helps you get through, traumatic types of things. And I do think this is going to be lifelong. I just don't think that you can find out these types of things in the middle of your life and not have it like affect you in all kinds of different ways. And I think it will be nice. I think it would be nice if we, as donor conceived people, could start to see changes that will help future generations with just the basics of information. And that we use our own stories and our own humor to like help other people. And I think I tried to do that as well. Like I've tried to be pretty active on new people who find this out and offering the ability to talk with them and say, I know you're in a dark place, but in like 3 weeks, your cloud's going to lift a little. It's like that kind of approach. And I've made some nice connections with other donor conceived people on Long Island. And we've had a couple brunches. So that's something I haven't mentioned, that like we've met up as like a little group of women dealing with the same thing with different stories. So like all these little things I think are helping process it.
Yeah. Yeah. That coming together is a huge part of it. And I also agree that humor, I haven't talked too much about humor on most of these episodes, but I think if you're able to get to a point where you can joke about this in some way, first off, that's a privilege, I think, to be able to do that. But second, I think it's a good sign that maybe you're handling this in a way that is healthy. Like I just came from my parents' house a couple hours ago and I already forget what I did, but it was something silly. And my dad was
It
like,
wasn't
you're not
crap, right?
my dad's like, you're not my son anyway. And I'm, we laugh about it, but like
Yeah.
there are many families who, if, if the father said something like that to a donor conceived person, like that would be kind of messed up. But like, I don't know. It just feels like to laugh at something like that means we are probably doing something that is working, yeah, I think it's just a good sign if you're able to get to that point. But I also understand how like that's something that many people can't even begin to think about. Like it's no laughing matter for a lot of people. But I think if it is, then that feels healthy. I don't know.
It does,
Maybe
but
there's more to it.
I think they can live at the same time. Like I think that it isn't a laughing matter and I take it very seriously and I think it's traumatic, but I think that at the same time you can use humor to diffuse it and to get through the hard time. So I think it like can coexist.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
obviously, yes, each person, different people will take points of offense perhaps at different times. So you have to obviously do it in the right way. But
Yes.
I do think it is the best way to like get everybody on like a common ground, you know?
Totally. If it's tastefully done, I think it
Yes.
can be an effective way to kind of make light of it. Anything else that you want to add that maybe hasn't come up yet that you feel is important to your story, or anything that you want to say to anyone who could be listening to this right now?
Feel like we covered like a lot of ground on the story. I think the thing I would want to say is that if anybody starting out on this journey um is struggling with, I think, being like open and talking about it, I'd like to encourage people to feel that they should be comfortable in the right way talking about it, or we're always going to be in some ways in the shadows. And I feel that with anything that's hard to talk about in life, if we don't bring it up, it just becomes more secrets that we're hiding. So I feel that it's important that whether you're a donor conceived person, you know, and you can do it in a way that you're comfortable with, but I just think that putting it out there in the world is the only way that people will start to realize that this is something that we do need to like change in the future. And I think by putting it out there is the only way that other people struggling can get kind of like healed and feel like there's like people out there that like understand what's going on. So while I think that that's easier said than done at the right time, I do encourage most people to try to find those connections and be vocal about it. Because I think if enough people start to talk about it and enough people get educated, that maybe things can start to change, like the system can change. And I'll start to work on the marketing approach for the genetic companies. I think I will end on that. I think that for the
I
most,
love it.
this is where I'm going to end because I work in the field of marketing and it never dawned on me that this is why I think it's fascinating, that this could be an implication of taking this test. Now, I don't know what that says about me. However, it didn't dawn on me. I feel that what was missing from the kit was like a little square box in red that just said something big like, please, warning, this type of a test could uncover things about your biological life, your family, or your upbringing that you may not know or expect. Like, proceed with
Yeah.
caution. I'm not saying
Yeah.
if I read that box, I wouldn't have taken it, but I do think if I had read that box, I would have been like, okay.
Yeah.
The fact that it doesn't even mention it on the boxes, on the websites, it's also go find your old aunts and cousins that you haven't seen since they moved to Seattle. It's
Yeah.
never like, hey, your whole life's going to fall apart. So don't take the test until you realize what could happen. Like,
Right. It's like the
not
surgeon's
mentioned
warning
anywhere.
on a can of beer or on a pack of cigarettes. Like, hey, maybe think about some of these possibilities before you go forward with
Yes, it's right
doing
on.
this.
You're right. It is on the
Yeah.
cigarette box. It is
Yeah.
on the can of soda. Those poor
Yeah.
people, the Diet Coke people, the phellacanorics, whatever those are. I've been
Yeah.
looking at that poor disease for my whole life. And yet on all of these boxes, it never suggests that this could be a challenging situation when I do the test. So that's what I want to go down for. I'm going to be sending emails to every future genetic company about their marketing platform, what's on the site, what's on their Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah. Great idea. I like that. And then any of these DNA testing companies should be hiring someone like you for their marketing team immediately.
I mean, fair.
Yeah. Cool. So this is basically at the point where I would hit the stop button, but
You get to
I
eat
tend to just
pizza. You get to.
almost. I've got like some kind of pasta bolognese that my wife made. But I keep this going because at times there are questions or just commentary that pops up that I'm like, oh man, I wish I was still recording to get that into the episode. But yeah, so going forward, basically, like I said in the beginning, it could be anywhere from a week to a month or so before I'll edit this and put it out. But I guess other than that logistical stuff, do you have any questions for me that maybe will spark something that can find its way into the episode?
Well, I think I have a general question. I was curious if I forgot a little bit, but what was your main goal in starting the podcast? Like, what was your main, for starting this? Like, what was your main objective? And then did you put I couldn't remember, but did you post about your book and starting the podcast, in one of the donor conceived groups? Is that I forgot how I found you.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. Early on, before it existed, when it was just an idea, I posted, I think it was both on Reddit and in one of the Facebook groups. And I did that for both the book and the podcast.
Okay.
The podcast, it was never even on my radar until the book came out, which was in February. And I thought at that time, how therapeutic in a way it was for me to tell my story, and that I felt comfortable doing so, in a very public way. And I thought, okay, what if I could help other people do that too? And that's sort of where the podcast came in. And, as I said up front, and as you just experienced, there's no rules to this. It's whatever you have to say to get your story out is how I want it to play back when the episode gets published. This is meant for the guest. I'm just here to kind of steer the conversation when needed, but I want it to feel like a safe space for people to talk about this stuff because, I think in your case, you've been relatively open about it. But like I said in the beginning, I've spoken to people where it was their very first time really speaking openly about what they've gone through. And I just think that's so important for people to, especially the ones who've been really traumatized by this, to have a place where they can do that. There are therapists out there who could do it much better than I could, but I thought at the very least, lending a listening ear and creating this space where guests can now come together and listeners can come together around these shared stories, it just felt meaningful, or like it could have a lot of meaning to it. And very early on, within, just a couple episodes being put out, I quickly realized that, there's not a massive audience, but the ones who are listening are listening all the time. So I'm like, okay, I have to keep this going. And, it'll snowball at the rate that it needs to. But, my wife and I would DJ every now and then, or at least we used to. And we always used to say, if one person comes to our gig and has a meaningful experience, then we should keep doing this or consider continuing to do it. And I take the same approach with this. If it's impacting even just one donor conceived person's life in a positive way, then it feels like I should keep doing it because there's potential that it could affect more people's lives.
I think it's beyond needed. I don't think there is something else like this. I think it's cathartic. I think it helps other people. I think it helps the person. I think that's sort of how the group was. It's a unique thing because even as much as our partners are so supportive and loving, the one thing I would say and why I feel like this podcast is so important is that nobody understands this unless it happened to you. As empathetic as anyone I have met is, the people that get every feeling and every part of your journey, no matter what the differences is another donor conceived person. So I feel like there is such a unity in the community that is being created. Allowing people to have something like this is so important because I think in some way I was looking forward to it for the same reason. It does feel therapeutic, but it really feels like you're connected to people who get you and nobody else really can. And there was a little bit of a thread I remember at one point on the group where people were sharing that they felt there was something special about us as a people, as a donor conceived people, or not parent expected, anyone in that group. And I think that overwhelmingly that people are empathetic, seem to be more highly inquisitive, more accepting because we're dealing with something. And I think it helps you with the outside rejection that you're getting, if you're getting it from the families or the donor, or even in like your situation, while very pleasant and nice that you have the information you have, it is still a form of rejection because you're not,
Yeah.
because you know what that person has their limits are, and he's not willing to do more. And I'm sure that there's a part of you somewhere that's like, looking that person in the eye would have been nice, but I have to accept that I can't do it. And
Yeah.
who else is going to understand the serious part of this trauma is just people that there, no one else can also understand this. It's
Right.
so unique and it's so niche, and it's a, the last 2 decades sort of phenomenon. I can't even imagine that this won't grow more. And I think people then will want to go back and listen to other people's stories to feel less alone in the world. So I
Right.
think, well, first, just thank you for doing it because it was an amazing experience, but it's impossible not to be. It's sort of like on the positive side, like you found this like thing now in your life that you now want to advocate and help other people with.
Totally.
So it's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate all of that. And yeah, I think, we're still in the awareness stage of all
Yeah.
of this in so many ways, right? So it kind of requires donor conceived people to lean on each other because not only is it like not the biggest group out there, like it is a niche thing, but you've also got people who are donor conceived who are being encouraged wrongfully to not talk about it.
Right.
And then you think about like, yeah, it's just everybody really is touched by this. I just don't think we know it yet.
Yeah.
Because think about your circle of people, whether it's family or friends or anyone that you're acquainted with, like they all know you and they know that you're going through this. And you think about all the donor conceived people out there who have their own circles. Like it really touches pretty much everybody. So I think shining a light on how we deal with our lives being turned upside down in ways that are unlike any other group that's out there, I think, the rest of the world should be taking note on like
Hmm.
how that's dealt with, and
Yeah.
also be mindful of like, wait, how did we get here in the first place? Like, and how can we make the traumas that come along with it, how can we remove them or lessen them and make this easier for people? Because I do kind of believe that like donor conception in itself, like there are couples that struggle to conceive. Like it's just the way it is. I do think that it should be an option for them to use a donor, but there's got to be rules and regulations built around the whole system that are made with the child as the primary
Right.
person we're being mindful of and how it affects them.
Yeah. Someone said we have more laws and legislation and rules for pet adoption than we
Yes.
do for donor conceived people. Like that is
Yep.
that is the society that we are living in, and that
Yeah.
cannot be right. I
It's
love my
insane.
I love my dog. However,
Right.
we
Yeah.
this has to change the way that it's going on.
Yeah. Well, I say this almost every episode. The only way change actually occurs is by people using their voices. And, that's exactly what you're doing right now. So thank you for being, one of the donor conceived people that's willing to do that. And hopefully collectively the voice gets loud enough that things start to move in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you.
I'm going to stop this.